Howdy, y'all. We are in the LAOL lounge, or as I call it, the cat house, and we are going to do an episode just recapping the Lil Lefty build. And we're going to start with what we did wrong.
Well, there's plenty there.
I would say the first thing that we did wrong was purchase a not running tractor with an engine froze.
Well, it was fine to purchase it, but it probably shouldn't have been rebuilt.
No, we shouldn't have dumped all of our money into it. We shouldn't have. We should have, ideally for one this complicated, we should have started with something that was at least the engine was free.
Right.
That it was running, maybe, that needed cosmetic work, some seals and things. But we really bit off more than we thought that we had.
And this would have been a really good parts tractor because it had everything there. And it was relatively straight.
It was complete.
Yeah, it was complete. The hood was pretty straight. Nothing was bent up bad on it. Few minor dings. All the track guards were there. It was all complete.
And frankly, it was a one-owner tractor prior to the person that we got it from.
Right. We were actually the third owner.
The third owner, but he only had it for just a couple of months before he resold it because he probably wised up and realized what we should have.
Yeah. That it was going to be more work to rebuild than...
And so I guess starting from the beginning, the engine we kind of set to the side, and we worked on the head, which there was our first mistake with the head, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, the head was kind of the determining factor, which we were going to decide if we were going to build it. And we had the head fixed up. The mistake we made was not having it pressure tested or magnafluxed in the very beginning. So we spent money and had the seats and valves ground and all of that stuff done, thinking, hey, you know what? We got a good head. We can start from here. And 2 years later, we find that the head was bad.
Yeah. So that was our first mistake. The pistons in that engine, they were froze. They were stuck in there hard. It had a lot of water in that engine. So that was a sign.
That was another sign, because actually when we got the liners came out with the pistons intact, and we had to press the pistons out of the liners on the press.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
A lot of Dad's favorite tool was used for that.
Yeah.
The torch and the sledgehammer. It was a messy.
Well, if you go back and look at some of our videos, you'll see how ugly it was when we used the sledgehammer on that engine. And I'm kind of embarrassed that that's out there.
Yeah.
But we did.
While we're on that subject, I'm kind of embarrassed. The early videos, I was still on the wrong end of the learning curve. Let's just leave it at that. And it took me a while to learn editing and being concise on the camera. So that was an issue. I'd say the next major issue that we ran into was popping sprockets.
Yes. Yeah.
But you actually engineered a lot of that tool and designed it.
Yeah. I went down to a local metal shop and got some pieces, and we definitely overbuilt it. It's heavy. You don't handle it without a small floor shop crane.
No, and we've popped a lot of sprockets with that tool since we've built it.
Yeah. And we spent several days building that thing.
Yes.
But it works good. And
it does work good.
And we didn't damage any sprockets. It's really easy if you don't have good pressure on the spokes in the proper place. You can break the spokes on those sprockets real easy.
And that's why when Dad designed it, it pulls around the hub and not out on the spokes or further out on the sprocket.
Right.
So it's really a good design.
Yeah, it's worked well for us.
Yes.
As long as you got enough power.
And that was a failure from the get-go. I started with a 20-ton puck, which really, other than popping off the little pinions on the bull gear, has been worthless for the rest of this build. If I was to start again, I would start with a 50 period.
Yeah.
And that would cut it for most things.
Yeah.
I'd say then the next issue was bellows seals.
Bellows seals were an issue, and we didn't know much about them. The bellows seals on that tractor were not usable because they were cracked and broke and leaking. We have on some of these other tractors taken bellows seals off that we now know from experience we can rebuild and reuse.
Yes. And at the time, we didn't have
Right.
that option. We didn't have any extra bellows seals.
Right.
So I bought the TD9 bellows seals, and Dad and his engineering friend Jack, they spent a lot of time making spacers to make those work.
To make them up, a spacer that I don't know if it's working or not. I think our problem is we've only got like, what is it, little like 5/16 of an inch that
Yep.
it can put pressure on the band to seal it, and I don't think that's happening. That's why we have leaky bellows seals to this day.
I think that and the material that's on those bellows seals is very rough, and it can allow oil to seep through.
Right.
So whereas the Caterpillar bellows seals, they've got a good, 3/8 of an inch or better that they can spring.
Oh yeah, more than that.
More
a good
than that.
half an inch, I'd say.
Yeah.
At
But
least.
those TD9 ones are, you really don't have any room for
Right.
error. And that's our problem. That might be something that we
Well, and
revisit.
back to the material, it actually had like a shellac or a glaze on it.
Yes.
That I think makes it easier for what we should have done was roughed it up with some
Sandpaper.
100 or 80 grit sandpaper so that it would not be so likely to be that slick.
And that's a technique that Caterpillar actually put in some of their service reference books to do on a flat surface with sandpaper on that new cork when you reinstall those on the bellows seal. So that's a step we skipped.
We didn't know that at that time.
No, and I flipped the washers where they seal to a nice glazed, shiny surface, thinking that they had no wear in them. They would be better. And it probably was, but it probably contributed to the leaks.
Yes, I think so. It's just too slick and too easy for that oil to run through there.
Yep. The steering clutches, they kind of went pretty smooth once we got it figured out. It's just a plate. The 20-ton puck was enough for that.
Well, and we bought new discs.
All new discs from General Gear.
Right.
And
right.
that went okay. I had to buy the special tool from General Gear to compress that in our big press. You have to have presses. That's just all there is to it for this.
Yeah, to pull the keepers out.
Big stuff.
Cleaning?
Until we get to the tracks.
Yeah.
Dad, a lot of it. What percentage of this would you say is just cleaning parts?
Cleaning and prepping parts is at least over 50%, I'd say. Well over 50%. And don't ever get into one of these tractors thinking there's any shortcuts. It's a putty knife and a brush and solvent, and that's all there is to it. It's just pure hard labor.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
No easy way. Now, prepping for paint, we did in the sandblasting for prep and paint. That saved us a lot. But before you sandblast, you've got to clean that stuff.
Well, and we made the mistake, actually Grandpa did on our Farmall H, of sandblasting it and then painting it, which is fine, but we got sandblast material in there that ruined a lot of the seals.
Yeah.
So realistically, you have to disassemble. You also have to degrease before you sandblast.
Yes. It's got to be relatively clean or you just impregnate your metal with contaminants.
Yeah, grease.
So now we did not sandblast any of our critical parts, our transmission, final drives. We did all by hand. Our sandblasting was confined pretty much to panels, hoods, tracks, things like that, where it wasn't going to get in any seals or in the engine. We didn't sandblast.
No compartments.
Right.
Let's talk tracks.
Oh, the tracks. Oh.
Did you forget about the tracks?
No, I did not forget. How could we forget? The tracks were. We were so wanting the project to be done by then, and those tracks kept giving us fits.
They came off that other 5T. Now, there's a lot of stuff I didn't show in a video, and I should have, and I didn't capture on video because it was someone else's property. But just the struggle to get that machine loaded, it took almost a full day.
Yeah, it did. It was a day.
They were stuck. I mean, the backhoe would hardly push that. And that tractor sat with those tracks next to an irrigation ditch, so it's sub-irrigated, and the track grousers that were down or the pins that were froze. And, you know, we really fought that. And to the extent, yes, they got soaked in oil, they got soaked in penetrating oil, they got heat.
They got soaked in water.
And I guess at that point we were willing to try anything, any old,
and we did,
farmer's wives' tale, whatever, to try and get them loose. And in the end, what worked?
What worked was just flat getting them on a machine that you could run them, and we also spent a lot of time with a press and a chain, punching them back and forth.
Just moving them manually, and a sledgehammer.
Yeah, and a sledgehammer, getting them to initially move. Then we put them on as you all seen on Buster, another machine we have that ran. And that machine pretty well broke them in for us.
It did. And I remember a comment under one of the videos, it might have been the one where we dunked them in water. And somebody was a cat mechanic in England, and he said, just put them on a tractor and run them.
Yeah.
He said that tractor will take way more than you can dish out. They're pretty bulletproof. So
yeah.
In the end, really, that's what it took. And I think that's going to take what it takes to finish it, to get it.
Well, and what we were afraid of putting them on Lefty, though, is that we damaged a fender doing that. We were going to run it on there. That's why even till just a short time ago, we left the right fender off, because we still have 2 sticky pins.
Yes.
On that side.
That was our reluctance to do that.
Right.
And then Buster came along and busted it.
Well, we pulled the fenders off of it, so there was no worry. And they were humping up pretty good.
Oh, it was ugly. It was a rough ride. It was no... I know I made a joke about being a Bronco rider, but first, that thing was as rough as riding a Bronc. It was pretty ugly.
Yes, it was. But it did the job well enough that we can run them on the tractor now and not be too worried that they're going to damage our tractor.
I think they're past that point if we keep running it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't leave them set and assume they're going to be okay.
And I think we've got 2, and I think they'll come around at some point.
I do too. So Dad wants to talk about my favorite topic.
That's your topic. And the belt pulley. The belt pulley put us back 2-3 weeks because it was our own stupidity. Something that was very simple. We got to pressing on things. You know, folks, when you press on something and it don't move, stop.
Yeah. There was a tiny set screw in the belt pulley, and it just cracked the heck out of that housing, which, fortunately, thankfully, to our neighbors, they brought over some nickel rod, walked me through the process, and we were able to repair. You can't see the repair.
No, you can't see it, and it doesn't leak. It seems to be fine, and... it was a learning process. We learned something about repairing cast iron cases
with weld.
Yeah,
it sprang back. It's within tolerance everywhere. I put new bearings in it. That thing, I'll bet that I got almost $2,000 in that belt pulley.
Well, between the
bearings and the
bearings,
repaper and the pulley,
and
all that stuff, I got
maybe not that much, but it's a lot.
Oh, it's that much.
It's okay.
Those bearings were for John Deere D axles, and they were hard to find. The race alone was $200.
Okay.
The bearing itself was $300. The paper pulley, maybe it wasn't $2,000, but it was a lot.
Well, see, this is something on this project. I wanted him to start from the beginning to keep a line item of our costs and things, and he says, "No, I'm not going to do it." So
I didn't want it to affect the bill.
When we're talking about what we spent on this tractor, if you want to know, we don't really know. We can give you a big window, and it's probably much more than the window we're going to give you in reality.
So when we do the 5T Carl, we're going to keep better track of that.
I'd like to keep a better line.
It drives Dad nuts. I didn't want it to affect the build because the whole purpose of this channel, as you all know, was to build a YouTube channel for my son. Most things went correct, but the paint and body work is one thing I'm not happy with.
Yeah, and
we rushed it.
Well, we rushed it, but we also, halfway through our painting, ran out of paint that we couldn't get.
On the next one, I'm not using tractor
No.
tractor paint from the tractor store.
We made mistakes.
It also that paint will absorb oils. It'll stain. You can't clean it.
Well, we didn't use hardener in it.
We didn't.
In the first paint. And we will never do that again. We will buy good automotive type paint, use hardener in it, and buy enough paint to get you clear through the whole process without changing brands or color matches or things like that. We have a little color problem because we matched it as close as we could, but it's never perfect.
No. So that's definitely something that we learned on this process.
Yeah, and it's adequate, and the latter half, most of the panels, the seat, the hood, a lot of things have hardener in them, so they'll be fine. But if you look close in the right light, you can see a difference.
You can tell. And a lot of our Bondo bodywork, neither one of us are body guys.
Yeah,
and it's
we could have used some improvement there as well.
It looks like farmer job.
Well,
some of it.
Yeah.
Another thing that I was just thinking about that I learned on this process is you have to have the parts book, and you have to go by your serial number to your serial number date, and you have to use the parts that are encompassed in that serial number range. Caterpillars are very particular, and they change stuff.
Yes. A good example was in the main bearings on the engine.
Yes, bearings on the engine. That was
a very major thing, that you cannot use 7J parts, bearings in a 4G main bearings on the crank, because they're an entirely different design.
Well, I guess the big eye-opener for me was the fuel tower. There's a seal in the fuel tower on the later 4Gs, early 7Js, but the seal was on the governor
of the 4G.
Yeah. So when we switched to that different fuel tower, we didn't have a seal in there, and I had to backtrack and fix that.
We had to pull it off and redo it.
So it is imperative to check your part numbers, and I get a lot of questions in the videos about, what part do I use for this and what part do I use for that, and I'm completely reluctant to say without knowing a serial number range. And the thing is, some parts will work,
right? And
you don't know that somebody didn't put an upgraded part.
Well, even within the same series, say for instance 4G, they made changes at, say, 4G 2389, where 4G 2390 is different.
It's like we talked to a guy that does this stuff for a living, and he said Caterpillar's motto was, it's Tuesday, let's change something.
Yeah, and you will find many changes.
Yes, so not all Caterpillar parts are compatible. Definitely not.
Even in the same series.
No. Dad wants to talk about the head a little more.
Well, we touched on it earlier, that was a determining factor of the going ahead with the project, which we now know we shouldn't have. But that head, we were so happy when we first fired up the engine. Everything went well. We had wet stacking, and everybody told us, you need to take it out and run it and pull it, which we did. And after, about 30 minutes of pulling it, we brought it in, and guess what? We got milky oil, and we got water and things. So we brought it in here. I told Aaron, I says, let's let it set overnight. We'll pull the plug in the morning on the oil pan, and if we got water in there, we know we have issues. And sure enough, quite a bit you probably got a half a cup of antifreeze out of the bottom of that, easy.
It was bad.
And the oil,
we had clean water in there too.
Yeah, and it was, we knew we had a problem. We pulled the head. We took it down to our machine shop, which we finally found. That was another issue in the beginning. We didn't have any people that would work on it. The Caterpillar dealer's not going to work on a tractor that old. No. Aaron called another shop here at a town up north, and they said, yeah, we'll work on it, but it's going to be 8 or 9 months before we can get to it. And we luckily found a shop that we kind of knew the people, and they've been very good to us on working on these old 4400 heads.
Well, I would say it's important to be in the tractor circles, the collector circles, the Caterpillar circles. Join ACMOC, just for the form. Go to the shows, meet people. That has really found us a lot of friends, a lot of parts, and it's really helped this whole project come to completion, because we wouldn't have been able to without the parts.
And a lot of your viewers,
YouTube, yes,
on your comments are very helpful.
Yes,
and say, hey, yeah, we should have done that. What that guy suggested.
YouTube in general. I mean, we watch Squatch's videos. We
watch
learn.
A lot of folks.
Yeah,
and the comments can be very useful.
Yes, absolutely. As far as the heads go, I don't think rebuilding one of these 4G tractors, I wouldn't do it. These heads are problematic.
They seem to be, because we've had 5 into the shop, and we have 2 that have been rebuilt and okay, and they're not perfect.
No,
by any means.
Far from it.
They've got some small heat cracks and things that could present an issue. But being we're not going to pull this tractor under full load 8-10 hours a day, they're probably going to be fine as long as we don't get it hot.
Yes, yeah. The one that we put on Lefty more so than the other one.
Right.
But I think I would start with maybe a 5T, something where they change the pre-combustion chambers. There's obviously something different in the water jacket in those heads, those early ones. So, and it may have been fine when they were built, but over the years they're very prone to corrosion and rust and pitting inside there. So,
and quite frankly, if we were to do this again, and we've been told by other folks that the best era D4s are actually your 6 and 7Us.
Yeah.
If you're going to rebuild one, they have the bigger, newer D315 engine, which there are more parts available for those too. Not you won't find everything for them, but there is more available for those. And those, if I wanted a D4 today and I was going to rebuild one, and I'd get a 7U.
I would too. One that's at least free. The engine's free.
Right.
There's still a few parts available. The first generation, and I call the first generations the 4G, 7J, 2T, 5T.
Right.
The first generation. Second generation being your 6U, 7Us. Third generation being like the D4C.
Right.
So I would stay with the second or third generation if I was going to mess with this more.
6 and 7Us, and the only difference between a 6 and 7U is the track gauge width. A 6U is just narrower. Otherwise, it's the same tractor as a 7U.
I think that the late 5Ts would be okay. They got different final drives and stuff too. That's another thing on Lefty that's weak is the final drives. Not necessarily the final drives, but the pillow block and
oh yeah.
They changed all that. I think maybe in the 2Ts. That's the only one we don't have is a 2T.
Yeah, we don't.
And that's the Warrior tractor.
Right. It was like from 42 to 44. I think.
We keep remembering things, and I just thought of our radiator. That was another one that took up a lot of time and effort.
It really did. And this radiator was our 3rd try. And it's funny because that was actually a friend of ours that we actually bought some tractors from, had this laying on a
the core.
Outside.
He's talking about the core.
Yeah, the radiator core was laying outside on an old fuel tank, and we're walking by, and Aaron spotted it, and he says, that looks like it's off of a D4. And the fella says, yeah, it is. And Aaron says, would you like to sell that? Is it a good one? He says, oh yeah, I took it off, and that's why I saved it, because it is a good one. So that is how we ended up with a good core for this tractor, because Lefty's original and the
7J.
The 7J that we had, they leaked like sieves.
Well, here's the other problem. We can't find a radiator shop that would work with them.
Right.
So let's talk about wins. What are you most happy with the build? What turned out the best?
Well, the pony motor ran really well. I mean, it was down about 6 weeks, and we rolled it out there, turned the fuel on, turned the mag on, full choke once, and one pull was running. Every time we start.
I would say that's the one thing I'm probably the most happy with.
Yeah, it runs really well. Spins are up nice, starts good. We put an inline fuel shut off, which helps because you always want to run those out of fuel.
Yep. And those valves that are on those sediment bowls, they tend to leak.
Yeah.
They're hard to get them fixed. There's a way you can do it with JB Well and drill it out, but I don't know. The best way that we've found is just to put that extra valve in there, and it'll positively shut it off.
Right. And the main diesel seems to run well.
Yeah.
I mean, it would idle down and
it seemed to go together well.
Yeah.
I was a little skeptical of making those big gaskets around the front cover and the oil pan. It took some big sheets of gasket material, but Dad did a great job. Those turned out really well.
As far as we know.
So far, I'm probably jinxing us right now.
Unless maybe that's our problem. One of them's leaking.
Or it's plugging something up that we forgot about.
Yeah.
That was one thing I was a little happy with.
We haven't run that engine a lot, but it runs well other than the water issue getting into the crankcase.
I will say another thing that I thought turned out pretty well was your decals. You were real tedious putting those on, and they're nice.
They turned out okay. They're straight. We re-tagged the tags for the serial numbers too.
Yeah.
I cleaned those up. Some of the brass tags, like on the fuel pump, I shined up with some Brasso and just elbow grease.
Yeah, that stuff all looks good.
They look really nice.
The fuel pump one really looks good.
Yeah. The patent number one on the side of the seat turned out pretty well, other than it was scratched up, which we can't do too much about that.
I am going to say that for all the trouble that it was, the belt pulley turned out good.
Yeah, it did. It did.
I'm pretty happy with that. I was able to find some good bearings and races that were expensive for it, so that's something I actually am kind of happy with.
And those aren't common. We did get another tractor here just this last fall that had a belt pulley on it.
Buster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the only other one we've seen.
Yeah.
With and it works as well. I did a little damage to it at one point. That's another story. But
I don't know. I'm having trouble really thinking of things that I'm really happy about, because I can sit here and I can think of every flaw and every problem that we encountered on this whole thing.
And we did encounter problems and setbacks. And we were, I think it's been mentioned before, we tried to make that show in late August last year. If the tracks would have worked, we'd have been there.
Yeah, but we'd have been there with a leaky head that was getting water in the oil. So maybe it's good that we weren't there when that happened.
That could be.
Because we'd have been using come-alongs to get that thing back on a trailer, probably.
Yeah, who knows.
There was one other thing that we did that was new to us, that was our first go-around, that actually turned out real well, and that was metal stitching that crack in the block.
Right.
I was happy with that. I'm happy with the Glipdol. That was a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm glad I found out about Glipdol.
That worked
because
well.
Inside of that oil pan, it's beautiful, and it drains well.
And the valve cover.
The valve cover, too, putting it in there, that helped.
That stitching was in an unimportant area. It's just in the outside of the oil galley, so there's no pressure or anything. So
no.
It isn't like it was a critical area. It was where a dowel pin, somebody had probably forced it, and it cracked around the dowel pin.
Near the deep compression system.
Right.
But it turned out really well, and it camouflaged really well in the cast iron when we hit it with the needle scaler and a punch to kind of peen it. And if I hadn't have gotten a little close with the grinder, you really wouldn't be able to see it. Right. And even now that it's covered with paint, you can hardly tell.
Yeah, that turned out well, and we learned something about that.
Yeah, and a lot of that we had learned on the belt pulley crack too. So
yeah.
That's an entertaining video. It's one of my first videos that actually turned out where I was somewhat happy with it.
Yeah, the master pins on the tracks. When we started, we weren't quite sure how those worked with the plugs, and then you have to they're fine thread. What are they? I think they're 7 or ½ inch.
Yes,
they're S18 threads, and you got to get them cleaned out and pull them plugs out.
Those tapered plugs.
Right, those tapered plugs. The later I'm not sure when they get in. Maybe the 5Ts have a different master.
No, because we took those tracks off of a 5T.
Oh, that's right. Right. So
they're the same.
Probably the 7Us before they changed.
We're going to find out eventually.
But yeah, we learned about master links. And another negative, we're going to push pins.
Oh,
on the chains.
Yeah. That was a fail.
And that was a complete fail. And we've decided after fooling around with that and very high pressures that we'd best probably pay the money and take it to a shop or someone.
Buy the right tool, build the right elaborate tool or something. We were trying to,
Yeah, because we're dealing with pressures now that might take close to 100 tons.
Well, I mean, the sprockets were the still scary pressures. But,
yes. But with those,
you don't have the hard pins that can explode in bushings too. So.
Right, and we left the nut on so when it let go.
Another thing that went well was the clutch, the bushing in the new.
Oh, the master clutch.
That got a really nice rebuild that Dad's friend helped do. That turned out really well.
Machined a bushing and pin for the master clutch. It's nice and tight, no wobble in it. Those get a lot of use, of course. And it was really wobbled out.
Yeah.
That turned out well. A lot of little things that you work on, spend hours on, and you tend to forget. And
a lot of little things that, maybe little parts and pieces and tools people sent us that helped us get through it.
Right.
The gaskets, for the pony motor from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was a lot of help from you guys and just viewers of the channel.
Again, it's a big learning experience. We're still learning.
Yeah,
We're by no means, we know these better than we did 2 years ago, but there's still a lot of things, and there's still a lot of things we can't do, like the track pins, for example. I think that's something better left to where you got the right equipment and jigs.
Yeah. As for final thoughts, I think this is like anything mechanically that I have ever put together, and it may be just me personally, that I am never 100% comfortable with it. In my mind, I know every little flaw and every little thing and everything I'm worried about. I'm still nervous that we could have water issues or something with the head. And I'm guessing that that's probably a normal feeling or attitude from anybody that does this kind of work or restoration. But it's something that's always in the back of my mind that makes me nervous to actually get it out and use it or to take it to a show. I'm worried that something's going to happen.
I think that bothers me more than anything is perhaps we're still not 100% sure that issue's been solved.
We don't want it to embarrass us.
Right.
And I don't want to embarrass myself with it. So right now, if I don't use it and it sits here in the shop, in my mind, it's done. It's fine. If I take it to a show and it breaks, I'm going to look like a fool.
Well, secondly, the bellow seals bother me, but those they just leak. It's not going to damage anything.
No.
It's not going to make the machine immobile, but it's just messy. And maybe down the road we'll address it.
It just gives the cleaners cleaning to do in the shop because he runs around, puts pans in them, and drains the oil back into little jugs and screens it, and we put it back in.
Yeah, and that's something that bothers me. But mainly the water getting in the crankcase is still I'm like 80-90% not comfortable with that yet.
We're kind of like, did we get it all? Was it all residual? I mean, it seems like it's cleared up, but if we fire it up and run it again, is there going to be, we don't know.
Yeah.
Was there some antifreeze hiding in a compartment in the front sump up on some webbing inside the engine block that is going to drop out, and we're going to assume that it was the head? We don't know.
Yeah, because we're still... each time we fire it up, we lose a little water. And I don't know if it's from...
We don't know if it's spitting it out.
Right. Well, it did last time, but
yeah,
how much, we don't know.
Yeah, so we know it's not going in the crankcase that we can tell.
Yeah, that we can tell at this
because
point.
that seems to be drying up.
Yeah.
Is it just spitting it out the radiator? We don't know. The level, it was what, a gallon low last time.
Yeah, yeah.
But, I don't know. We've retorqued the head, too. We've ran it more.
Yeah, reset
Is
the
it
valves.
something that's going to clear up? Is that maybe that's just where it naturally wants to run, the water level? We don't know.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that's just constantly bugging us.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
I'm just making this for the members right now, and I guess the last thing we want to say is thank you. So we know you've all supported us. You've all supported the channel. You've all paid for channel memberships, and a lot of you have contributed in parts and super thanks donations. So thank you for that.
I agree. That big thanks to the comments and the suggestions and things I think I mentioned earlier that we've learned from people making suggestions, and it's like, oh yeah, we should have thought to do that. So thank you again for all of those suggestions and comments.
Yeah, and if you have video ideas for the future, I can't get to all of them, but let us know in the comments, and we'll see if we can pursue that in a future video.
I guess we'll say we like constructive criticism.
Yes. Constructive.
Thanks again.
All right, thanks, guys.